we need to talk about the Monster Hunter Wilds situation because I've been seeing a lot of things online, and even though we've been getting these new trailers that even revealed a brand new monster today during the Capcom presentation at Tokyo Game Show, or I should say a returning monster in the form of Yen Kutku at the very end, there has been a lot of discussion surrounding Monster Hunter Wilds. Some would call this drama, so let's talk about all of that. So let's start with today's presentation at the Tokyo Game Show. Frankly, it was nothing too much out of the ordinary, not much was revealed besides the fan favorite Yen Kutku making a return in Wilds, and it looks like we might be able to hunt Yen Kutkus in packs similarly to how we're going to be able to do so with Doshiguma, and the fact that Yen Kutku is back implies that we might be seeing Conchus in Monster Hunter Wilds as well, so that's all pretty neat and interesting, especially if you are an old fan of the series like myself and have fought multiple Yen Kutkus throughout your career. The trailer itself that they showcased was pretty much exactly the same that we saw 2 days ago at the Sony State of Play presentation, which is where they showcased Arcvel, the new flagship of Monster Hunter Wilds that is also known as the White Wraith, and they also revealed the Leviathan Uthduna and the Brute Wyvern Chemetris, aka the Fire Chicken. Now, a segment of this presentation was also dedicated to a video that Capcom later uploaded called A Beginner's Guide to Monster Hunter Wilds, where they essentially go through a lot of the basic features of the game, introducing you to the narrative and the cast of Monster Hunter Wilds with the expedition team, what is your role going to be as the hunter in Wilds, how you get to the Forbidden Lands, and all of that. It's the perfect type of video for you to showcase to one of your friends that maybe is unfamiliar with Monster Hunter, so that they can get a good idea of what the game is about, what they'll be able to do in it. And again, even though we already knew a lot of the things that they showcased in this small video, I think at the end it still turned out great, and the best part about it is that we saw 8 uninterrupted seconds of Gemma the Smithy in action. Thank you Capcom for inventing women. Overall, it was a pretty fun presentation that I got to live stream and talk to you guys about, but I'm not the type of guy to sit here and make a 20-minute video about it because we simply weren't shown enough for it. Now, I do want to bring up a couple of problems that I have been seeing pop up a lot, especially on Reddit and Twitter, and I've even had a couple of people DM me about it, with the first one being regarding the game's performance. Or rather, I should say that, along with the PlayStation State of Play trailer that we got 2 days ago, we also got the product information for Monster Hunter Wilds, and among it you could find the recommended specs and the minimal specs for Monster Hunter Wilds on PC. And in here lies a pretty big problem, because when you take a look at the recommended specs for Monster Hunter Wilds, not only do they ask you to have some pretty powerful GPUs and processors, but it comes with the caveat that these are the recommended specs for you to be able to run the game at 1080p with 60 frames per second with frame generation enabled and under the medium graphics settings. So the problem here is twofold. Not only do you need to have a pretty powerful machine, again we're talking about a GeForce RTX 4060 or some powerful i5 processors, the fact that frame generation is being taken into account for these recommended specs is essentially the developers using this as a way to cut corners, because they're using this technology that allows you to upscale the graphics of your game to make up for how the game is actually going to run. And this is actually a problem that Rikan has spoken about many times before in his videos, and how this pursuit of frame generation, DLSS, and ray tracing technology with AI has led to this part where developers are essentially relying on it rather than using them as tools to make the game run on more systems. So as of this moment, it seems as though the game might not ideally be optimized. I'm not going to say properly, but it certainly feels like it could be better than this. Now, we have all seen the Monster Hunter Wilds gameplay. There is a lot going on, especially when you are hunting a Doshiguma pack. There is this big sandstorm, then a raid owl comes in and you see the electricity and everything. Right, there can be a lot happening, especially if you are playing in multiplayer, so I can understand that the game's requirements are going to be high. But I just don't like that frame generation is being put there as part of the recommended specs. And I know some people have issues with the storage being 140 gigs, but honestly at this point I've just come to expect that games are going to be huge. Especially in the case of a game like this that is going to feature such a massive map. Now, there is one important thing that we should talk about, and that is the engine that the game is going to be run on, and that is of course the RE engine, which actually doesn't stand for the Resident Evil engine, it's actually the Reach for the Moon engine. Now, the RE engine has done some fantastic stuff, to the point where you're able to run Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch without dropping frames, and that kind of feels like a miracle. At the same time, however, However, we cannot forget about Dragon's Dogma 2 that launched in a very unoptimized state to the point where up to very recently we were still getting patches and updates for Dragon's Dogma 2 with the goal of fixing the game's overall performance. So it's not like the RE engine is overall perfect, so there is some caution to be taken there. And as for the minimum required specs for Monster Hunter Wilds, I also saw some people getting upset over it, as the hardware that is stated in the minimum required specs is all pretty recent, with a lot of them having been released in 2022. And a note regarding the minimum required specs states that not only do you require an SSD, which is pretty standard at this point, the game is expected to run at 1080p upscaled from 720 native resolution at 30 FPS under the lowest graphics setting. Hopefully you guys are going to be able to run the game above the minimum settings, but you're going to need a pretty beefy system to be able to play this game properly. Now, we currently don't have a proper benchmark to test all of this for you to know if your machine is able to run the game, but thankfully we all know that we're going to have a playable demo very soon. Now, I was actually expecting to have a playable demo revealed at the very end of the Tokyo Game Show presentation, especially as they were going through the beginner's guide video that I mentioned before, because they really showcased every feature. They talked about how you're going to be able to play with friends and all of that. It really felt like it was leading up to something. Regardless, I think that everybody expects that we're going to be getting a playable demo. That has been the tradition for Capcom for as far as I can remember since the 3DS days, and these demos are not like those betas that you need to pre-order the game to play them. You'll be able to download the demo for free, and you'll be able to test if your machine can actually run Monster Hunter Wilds properly. Now, I do have a little bit of a suspicion, or a theory you can call it, that the demo is going to be released earlier for PlayStation Plus members. The reason why I say this is because Capcom along the years has always had these very favorable deals with PlayStation and Sony, that for example the demo for Monster Hunter World released a little bit earlier for everybody that had PlayStation Plus, and the same thing happened with Iceborne as well. And on top of that, there was a time where PlayStation Plus members in Japan were able to get Monster Hunter World entirely for free, and there were some huge Monster Hunter sales for PlayStation Plus members here in the West. And again, given that the trailer that was showcased at the Tokyo Game Show was pretty much the exact same trailer that was shown at the Sony State of Play presentation that was shown just 2 days before the Tokyo Game Show, I really do believe that there is a little bit of a connection there. And so, I'm sorry to say, but if you don't own a PlayStation, I do think that this is what's going to happen. Now, the final thing I want to point out is I have seen a lot of people upset at some of the quality of life updates that have been added to Monster Hunter Wilds, but I've also seen some people upset at some of the gameplay changes, like for example the portable campsite for you to fast travel, how you can ride your sacred much like you can ride your palamute to sharpen your weapon or consume a potion for example, and even how some of these weapons seem to have much less risk reward associated with some of their attacks. Ratatosker has made a very good video where he addressed some of his concerns for Monster Hunter Wilds, and one big highlight of that video was how he felt that some weapons, like specifically the dual blades and the longsword, that are very fast weapons that have a lot of invulnerability that is built into their kit, they had those very narrow windows where you would be vulnerable while performing a certain attack. So for example, the Spirit Helmbreaker for the longsword or the Demon Dance for the dual blades, how these are going to be removed in Monster Hunter Wilds because you're able to cancel out of them at will and you're not going to lose anything by doing so, thus removing the risk versus reward interaction from those moves specifically, and as such simplifying and making the combat just a little bit overall easier. Of course, it's still very early to be talking about game balance, but I am personally in favor of having more risk versus reward type of scenarios, because those are the scenarios where you can really highlight how good a player is, as they are able to very quickly assess the situation and know what exactly is the best move to perform in relation to what the monster is doing, thus optimizing your damage windows and your overall performance. And it's not just about being a min-maxer, but it's about being rewarded for playing well, learning the game and adapting to it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still going to love Monster Hunter Wilds, I know that for a fact. I feel like it would be extremely difficult for me not to enjoy this game after everything that we have seen, but these are minor gripes and some small criticisms regarding a franchise that I love, and I think that criticizing some things about a thing that you like is in fact healthy. With that being said, let me know exactly how you feel about Monster Hunter Wilds. When do you expect us to be getting a playable demo, because I was expecting to see it here, though at this point it seems that it's going to be much more likely at the very end of November or maybe December. I hope you are all as excited as I am about Monster Hunter Wilds. My name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!